I used to think the night shift would be easy money. Less people, less hassle. Just me, a quiet store, and a paycheck at the end of the week. I never thought it would be the worst mistake of my life. I'm Ethan, 23, and I've been working at Miller's Market, a small convenience store in a town so small it barely shows up on the map. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone and nothing ever happens until it does. The store sits on the edge of town, right next to a long stretch of empty highway and a patch of woods that people liked to avoid after dark. But I didn't care. It was just a job. My shifts were from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most nights were dead quiet. A couple of late-night drivers grabbing coffee, some truckers filling up at the pumps, and the occasional drunk local stumbling in for snacks. But that night was different. It started normal enough. I clocked in, tossed my hoodie behind the counter, and started restocking the shelves. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the only sound besides the hum of the old fridge in the back. Around 11:30 p.m., the bell over the door jingled. I looked up to see a man step inside. Tall, too thin, wearing a faded gray jacket that looked about 2 sizes too big. His face was partially hidden under a baseball cap, but I could tell something was off about him. He didn't go to the shelves, didn't browse. He just stood near the door, staring at me. I gave him a nod. Evening. Need any help? He didn't answer, didn't even blink, just stood there, watching me. After a few uncomfortable seconds, he finally moved, walking slowly down one of the aisles. But he didn't pick anything up, just walked. I tried to shake it off. Probably just some weirdo. You see all kinds on the night shift. But then, a few minutes later, I glanced at the security monitor behind the counter, and he was gone. I didn't hear the door chime, didn't hear him leave. I stared at the monitor, flipping between the cameras. The aisles were empty. He wasn't there. I stepped out from behind the counter, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. Hello. Silence. I walked down each aisle, checking between the shelves. No one. I even checked the back storage room. Still nothing. I was starting to feel that tight, uneasy feeling in my chest. The store wasn't that big. There was no way he could have just disappeared. I walked back to the front, checked the door. Still locked. Then I noticed something. Something that made my skin crawl. The bathroom light was on. I knew I hadn't turned it on. And no one ever used the bathroom this late. It was a single stall, tucked in the back of the store near the employee break room. I grabbed the metal flashlight we kept under the counter, just in case, and made my way toward the door. I knocked once. Stores closed soon. You okay in there? Silence. I knocked again, louder this time. Nothing. My heart was pounding in my ears. I reached out, wrapped my fingers around the handle, and turned it. Unlocked. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence. The fluorescent light inside flickered. And then, I saw it. Not the man, but something else. The mirror above the sink was smashed. Shards of glass littered the floor, and written across the cracked surface, in something that looked an awful lot like dried blood, were 3 words. Check the freezer. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. This wasn't some random customer. This was something else. Something wrong. I backed out of the bathroom, my grip tightening on the flashlight. My eyes darted toward the back of the store, to the industrial freezer we used for storing ice and frozen goods. The door was closed. But now, I swear I could hear something. A faint, rhythmic thumping from inside. My stomach twisted. I didn't want to go back there. But I had to. I moved slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. The closer I got, the louder the noise became. Thump, thump, like someone or something was inside. I reached the freezer door. My hand hovered over the latch. I took a deep breath, bracing myself, and then pulled it open. At first, I didn't see anything, just stacks of frozen pizzas and ice bags. But then, I saw it. At the very back, wedged between 2 crates of frozen food, a hand, pale, stiff, fingers curled into a fist. I staggered back, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But then, the hand moved, Just a twitch. A slight, jerking motion. But it moved. I slammed the freezer door shut and bolted for the front of the store. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on? I fumbled with my phone, trying to call the cops, but there was no signal. Not even a single bar. That's when I realized. The door to the store was wide open. I knew I had locked it. I knew it had been shut just minutes ago. But now, it was swinging gently in the cool night breeze. And outside, standing just beyond the glow of the parking lot lights, was the man in the gray jacket. But this time he wasn't alone. There were two more figures with him, and they were all staring right at me. They were just standing there. 3 figures in the parking lot, their faces obscured by the flickering overhead lights. The man in the gray jacket in the middle, and 2 others flanking him. One tall and broad, the other smaller, hunched over like he was carrying something heavy. All of them staring right at me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I didn't know what to do. Run? Hide? But before I could move, they started walking toward the store. Panicked, I ran back behind the counter, fumbling for the keys to lock the door. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped them. Finally, I jammed the key into the lock and turned it just as they reached the entrance. The man in the gray jacket pressed his face against the glass. And that's when I got my first good look at him. His skin was pale, almost gray, like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. But it was his eyes that really got me. Why, unblinking, like he wasn't really looking at me, but through me. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide, too forced, like he didn't quite know how to do it right. I grabbed the phone again, desperate to call for help, but it was still dead. No signal. Nothing. I looked back up, and my stomach dropped. The man in the gray jacket had something in his hand now. A crowbar. Before I could react, he swung it. The glass door shattered, shards spraying across the floor. The sound snapped me out of my panic. I sprinted to the back, through the stockroom, heading for the emergency exit. But when I got there, my blood ran cold. The door was chained shut from the outside. I was trapped. I heard the sound of footsteps crunching on broken glass as they entered the store. I ducked behind a shelf of cleaning supplies, heart racing, trying to stay quiet. But then I heard something that made my skin crawl. Whistling. One of them was whistling a slow, tuneless melody, the sound echoing through the aisles. They weren't in a hurry. They knew I had nowhere to go. I tried to steady my breathing, thinking of my options. I had to find a way out. There was a small bathroom window in the back. Too small for most people, but maybe, just maybe, I could squeeze through. I crept toward the bathroom, every step feeling like it echoed through the whole store. The whistling was getting closer. I made it to the bathroom and quietly closed the door behind me, locking it. I climbed onto the sink, trying to pry the small window open. It was stuck, the old paint holding it shut like it hadn't been opened in years. I pushed harder, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, I heard a knock on the bathroom door. Not loud, just soft, deliberate. I froze, my hands still on the window. Another knock, followed by a voice. "We know you're in there, Ethan." My blood turned to ice. How did they know my name? I didn't respond, didn't move. But the voice continued, calm and almost playful. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Just come out. We only want to talk." I pushed against the window with everything I had, the old wood finally giving way with a loud crack. But that noise was all they needed. The next sound I heard was the bathroom door being kicked in. I scrambled through the window, feeling glass, and would scrape against my arms and sides. I hit the ground hard outside, rolling onto my side. But I didn't stop to check for injuries. I just ran. I sprinted toward the tree line, not daring to look back. But I could hear them behind me, their footsteps pounding against the pavement, growing louder with every second. And then, I heard it again, that damn whistling. But this time, it was coming from in front of me. I skidded to a stop, my chest heaving. Out of the darkness, a figure stepped forward from the trees. Not the man in the gray jacket. Someone else. Someone waiting. They had planned this. They knew every move I was going to make. And I had nowhere left to run. I turned around, hoping to find a gap, a path, anything. But all I saw were 4 figures now, surrounding me, and every single one of them was smiling. I was trapped. 4 of them, standing in a loose circle, their faces barely visible in the dim light from the store behind me. The man in the gray jacket was still there. His smile stretched too wide, like his skin didn't quite fit his face. The others, one broad-shouldered, another thin and twitchy, and the last one was different. He wore a mask, not like a Halloween mask. It was a plain, white face with no features, just empty holes where the eyes should have been. And he was holding something long and sharp. My breath came in shallow gasps. The only sound was that same whistling, slow and tuneless, coming from the broad-shouldered one to my right. It was like they were waiting for me to make the first move, like this was some twisted game to them. I spun around, looking for an opening, anything, but they were too close now. I backed up until my shoulders hit the rough bark of a tree. And that's when the man in the gray jacket spoke. "You're not supposed to leave, Ethan." His voice was calm, flat, like he was reading from a script. "You're part of this now." I didn't know what he meant, didn't want to know. I just wanted to get out. "Look," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know what you want, but you can have whatever's in the register. Just take it." They didn't respond, didn't even blink. Then the one with the mask stepped forward. Slow, deliberate steps, raising the blade in his hand just enough for me to see the way it glinted under the faint moonlight. That's when I realized it wasn't a knife. It was a bone saw. I felt my stomach turn. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't even about me. This was something else. Something worse. I grabbed a broken branch from the ground, holding it like a weapon, even though I knew it wouldn't do much. But I wasn't just going to stand there. If they were going to come at me, I'd fight. I tightened my grip on the branch, bracing myself, and then, without warning, the man in the gray jacket dropped his smile. His face went completely blank, and he said one word: "Run." For a split second, I didn't move, didn't understand. "Run!" he shouted, his voice snapping like a whip. I bolted. I didn't question it. I just ran. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps pounding the earth, the whistling turning into laughter, high-pitched and manic. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel them closing in. I sprinted deeper into the woods, branches slashing at my face and arms, the cold air burning my lungs. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. After what felt like forever, I stumbled into a small clearing. I collapsed onto my knees, gasping for breath, my heart hammering in my chest. The woods were silent now, too silent. I strained to listen, trying to hear if they were still following me. But all I heard was my own ragged breathing. And then, a voice behind me: "You can't run from this, Ethan." I whipped around, but no one was there, just trees and shadows. I stumbled to my feet, trying to get my bearings. But the trees all looked the same. I was lost. That's when I saw it. A small cabin in the distance, barely visible through the trees. Old rundown, but it was something. I sprinted toward it, my legs screaming in protest. I didn't care if it was another trap. I just needed shelter. I reached the cabin and slammed the door behind me, locking it with the rusty bolt. I backed away, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The cabin smelled like mold and rot, the floorboards creaking under my weight. But at least I was inside. I collapsed against the wall, trying to calm down, trying to think. But then I noticed something. The cabin wasn't empty. In the corner, barely visible in the shadows, was a pile of something. I squinted, trying to see, and then my blood turned to ice. It was a pile of clothes, dozens of them, all in different sizes, some torn, others stained with something dark. But all of them looked recent. And on top of the pile was my hoodie, the one I left behind the counter at the store. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my ears. How did it get here? I turned to the door, ready to make a run for it, but it was too late. Standing in the doorway was the man in the gray jacket. But he wasn't smiling anymore. His face was blank, empty. like he wasn't even there. And behind him, the others. The one with the mask. The broad-shouldered one. The twitchy one. All of them staring at me. And then I realized, they didn't want to kill me. They wanted me to become one of them. As they stepped into the cabin, I saw it in their eyes. I wasn't escaping this. I was just the next player in their game. They stepped into the cabin one by one, blocking the only exit. The man in the gray jacket stood in front. His dead, glassy eyes locked onto mine. The broad-shouldered one was to his right, still whistling that same awful, tuneless melody. The masked one was to his left, the bone saw glinting in his hand. And the twitchy one lingered in the back, his head jerking in sharp, unnatural movements like a puppet on strings. I pressed my back against the wall, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I gripped the broken branch in my hand like it was going to save me, even though I knew it wouldn't. The man in the gray jacket finally spoke. "You can't fight this, Ethan." His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion, like he'd said these words 1,000 times before, like he wasn't even talking to me, but to the next me. "It's your turn now." I shook my head, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode out of my chest. "I don't know what you want from me," I shouted, my voice cracking. "Just tell me what you want." He took a slow step forward, and then another until he was standing just a few feet away. I could see the dirt and grime caked under his fingernails, the way his skin stretched too tight over his knuckles. He leaned in close, his breath cold against my face. "We want you to understand," he whispered. Before I could react, the broad-shouldered one lunged forward, grabbing me by the arms and pinning me to the wall. I struggled, kicking and thrashing, but he was too strong. The masked one approached next, lifting the bone saw to my face. But instead of cutting me, he slid the saw across my cheek, just enough to draw a thin line of blood. "This is how it starts," the man in the gray jacket murmured. I screamed, the sound echoing off the cabin walls, but no one was coming to help. Then, something strange happened. The twitchy one stepped forward, pulling something from his pocket. It was a small, cracked mirror. He held it up to my face, forcing me to look at my reflection. And that's when I saw it. The cut on my cheek wasn't just bleeding. It was spreading. The skin around it began to gray and crack, like old, dry paper. My eyes widened in horror as the color drained from my face, my features becoming just like theirs. I was becoming one of them. "No! No, no, no!" I screamed, thrashing harder, trying to break free. But the more I struggled, the weaker I felt. Like my body wasn't mine anymore. The man in the gray jacket leaned in closer, his face inches from mine. "Let go, Ethan," he whispered. "It's easier if you just let go." My vision started to blur. The room spun around me, the faces of the others melting into a haze of gray and black. I could feel my mind slipping, like I was sinking into a cold, dark pool with no bottom. But then, a memory flashed in my mind. My hoodie. I remembered seeing it on the pile of clothes when I first entered the cabin. But there was something wrong with that memory. The hoodie wasn't mine. Not really. It looked like mine, sure. But the stain on the sleeve, the tear near the pocket, those weren't there before. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't the first time this had happened. They had done this before, to someone else. And now they were doing it to me. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a spark of defiance cutting through the fog in my mind. I wasn't going to let them win. With every ounce of strength I had left, I slammed my head forward, catching the man in the gray jacket off guard. He stumbled back, and in that split second, I kicked free from the broad-shouldered one's grip. I grabbed the bone saw from the masked one's hand, swinging it wildly. The blade caught him in the side, and he let out a guttural, inhuman scream. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted for the door, crashing through it and into the woods. Branches slapped against my face, the cold air burning my lungs, but I didn't stop. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps pounding the earth, their ragged breaths growing louder. But I wasn't going to let them take me, not without a fight. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing on the side of the highway, gasping for breath. Headlights appeared in the distance, and I staggered to my feet, waving my arms frantically. The car screeched to a stop, and a man jumped out, his face pale with shock. "Jesus, kid, are you okay?" I collapsed into his arms, sobbing, unable to speak. But as I looked over my shoulder, back toward the woods, I saw them, standing at the tree line, watching, waiting, but they didn't come any closer. Not this time. I thought it was over. I thought I was safe. But when I got home that night, I found something on my bed. My hoodie. But it wasn't mine. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the hoodie that wasn't mine. Same color. Same style. But the stain on the sleeve, the tear near the pocket, those weren't there before. And it smelled like the cabin. That rotting, moldy scent that clung to everything in that place. I thought about calling the cops. I thought about packing up and leaving town. But something in the back of my mind whispered, it won't matter, because this wasn't over. The next day, I didn't show up for my shift. I couldn't even bring myself to drive past Miller's Market. But around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "We're waiting, Ethan." I dropped the phone like it burned me. My heart was pounding, my palms slick with sweat. I didn't reply, didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at the hoodie, waiting for something. But nothing happened. Until the next night. Another text. "Clock in." I didn't know why I went back. Maybe I thought I could end it. Maybe I thought if I faced them again, I could take back control. Or maybe I just didn't have a choice anymore. At 10 p.m., I drove to the store. The parking lot was empty. The broken glass from the night before was gone, as if nothing had happened. The store looked normal, but I knew better. I stepped inside. The bell over the door jingled, the sound echoing in the empty space. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, jittery shadows across the floor. And there it was, my hoodie, folded neatly on the counter. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. And then I saw the note underneath it. "We're short-staffed tonight. You know what to do." My hands were trembling as I picked up the hoodie. I didn't want to put it on, but I felt like I had to, like it was part of the job description now. The second I slipped it over my head, the air in the store changed. It felt heavier, like the walls were closing in. And then I heard it, the bell over the door. I spun around, but no one was there. Just the cold night air seeping in through the slightly ajar door. I stepped outside, the cool breeze hitting my face. The parking lot was still empty. But then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the woods. Tall, thin, wearing a gray jacket. I should have run. I should have left and never come back. But my feet moved on their own. One step, then another, until I was standing just a few feet away from him. His face was exactly how I remembered it. Pale, tight skin, dead eyes. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He raised his hand and pointed back toward the store. "It's your shift now." Before I could react, he turned and walked into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. And that's when I realized, this was never about them trying to kill me. They didn't want me dead. They wanted me to replace them. I was the next in line, the next player in their sick game. And just like them, I'd be waiting for the next person to walk through those doors. I stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness, my mind numb. Then I turned back toward the store and clocked in. So, if you're ever driving late at night and you stop at some out-of-the-way gas station or convenience store, if the clerk behind the counter doesn't say much, if he looks a little too pale, a little too tired, don't stay too long. Because maybe, just maybe, he's waiting for you to take his shift.